Welcome to the February Room, where we talk shop, tie flies, and share the fishing stories you never heard. I'm Lauren Carnop, your host, and this is the February Room. Presented by CD Fishing USA. Innovative construction equals exceptional performance. Visit cd-fishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Welcome to the February Room. I'm sitting on this great vintage couch with Al Pills. And Al, you're the outside sales and storyteller at the Kettle House.
It's true.
Thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, like you said, my name is Al Pills. I work at the Kettle House Brewing Company. I've worked there since 2001 and seen a lot of changes there. I can't believe it's almost 20 years, but yeah.
I know there's even a beer named after you.
There is. And good thing we make great beer, because I think that's a weak marketing angle to try and play there. With the last name of Pills, right, it works for a beer. So
called the Al Pilsner.
It's true.
Is that your favorite beer too?
No. It makes my black heart go pitter patter when somebody, names a beer after a guy or me, but I probably like our shady New England IPA the best right now.
Oh, I guess I've had that one, of course.
I got a can. I'll send you one on your way. So.
Thank you. I will take it. But also, you're originally from Wisconsin.
Yep. Born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin. Went to high school there, moved to Missoula when I was 21. So that was 1993, and that's, again, another bigger number than I'm comfortable with, but time goes by really quickly.
What decided you to move from Wisconsin to Missoula?
We were classic suburban Midwesterners who would do the Griswold family vacation deal and throw everybody in the station wagon and drive uncomfortably long distances on the interstate. I got motion sickness as a kid. My sister could read. I was super jealous, but we'd power through the Dakotas and head out west somewhere usually. We loved Yellowstone area. Went to Glacier, Yellowstone, Colorado, places like that. My friends were always like, "What the hell are you guys? You guys are going backpacking? What in the earth? What is that?" The classic thing, that a lot of my friends would do is would have a lake cabin or something up north in Wisconsin. We never did that when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time up there, had family up there, and did the fishing, hunting thing, but we never had that summer cabin, so we would always do the 2-week tour, and we came through Missoula a couple times back in the day. One trip I took as more of an adult was in 91, my freshman year of college. Me, my dad, my uncle, and his 2 sons all hopped in their Ford Econoline and drove and did this huge loop around the western U.S. Fly fishing. So my Uncle Bob was really my intro to fly fishing. And that is a passion that I've carried with me my whole life. And again, growing up in the Midwest at that time, fly fishing was not cool. People were all about drowning worms, but I saw this thing that he was doing, and I was like, what in the hell is that? I'm into that. His introduction, because by birth, the Pills family is a worm-soaking family, but my uncle met a guy named Gary Borger, who was an early kind of fly fishing guru. Probably late 70s, early 80s, he helped Gary do illustrations on 2 fly fishing books. One was called Nymphing and one was called Naturals. But it was kind of a more science-based book, less casting techniques, more bug life-oriented stuff. So anyways, he met this guy named Gary, and Gary was up there in the fly fishing world, and he must have had a pro deal with Fenwick and with Seal Dry waders, and he had his own wading boot at the time. So I looked up to my cousins and my uncle who had all this fancy gear. Somewhere there's a picture, I've tried to find it over the years, of one of these trips, and my dad wasn't willing to invest in the highest tier outdoor equipment for little Al. So there's these photos of my cousins standing there, and back then people wore seal dry waders, and it was even before neoprene. They were latex. So when you walked, it sounded like, like this rubber, like they were super. They were not tear resistant. They were easy to puncture. You carried around a patch kit. But anyways, my dad bought me these piece of crap, like vinyl waders that made it like half a day before I ripped everything. Instead of wading boots, I had these shoes, and they weren't even Converse All-Stars. They were called Pro Kugas, and it was like Kuga, I think. And they were canvas high top sneakers. So I'm, little Al walking around in the Yellowstone River at Buffalo Forge with all these nerds and all their like fly fishing gear, and I'm just like slipping around on the rocks. But I digress. But that was my intro to fly fishing back then, and that was something that I always wanted to be better at. So I've carried that torch, into my now 40s. So yeah, that was a long rambling diatribe, but that's kind of where the hook was set, so to speak.
Going fishing all around the United States, you come back to Wisconsin and going fly fishing on the lakes?
Yes, and actually Wisconsin, we lived in Madison, so we were close to that driftless zone in the Southwest, and there's a lot of limestones and spring creeks down there. So there's a ton of options for fly fishing in Wisconsin. The southern part of the state is more little teeny spring creek kind of thing. And then you go up north, and there was the Brule and the Namakagon and the Prairie and some of those rivers that are more famous in Wisconsin anyways. So I was looked forward to those moments. So yeah, we did fly fish in Wisconsin quite a bit. Different scene, a lot of nymphing, hardly any dry fly stuff. Come out west, you're throwing giant streamers and hoppers and stuff, and it's just so much more fun.
So how often are you going fishing, like, on your downtime? I mean, I know work is like...
These days?
Yeah.
As much as I can. But I was just telling this story recently. Like, when I first moved here, none of my friends had a boat, and there's no normal people really had boats. Well, we were in our early 20s, so nobody had any money either. But I took a job. I worked in a group home with developmentally disabled adults. Was my first job in Missoula. And the first day there, I met a guy named Damon Cox, whose brother Jim and his buddy Matt later started the Kingfisher Fly Shop. And Damon and I became fast friends. Now he's been a fishing guide for probably 20 years or something now. But we became fast friends, and his family had property out on Big Flat Road. So we would go there in the evenings and do the caddis thing all summer and try and get the night hatch, and so back then we'd go fishing all the time. Like, I kept a journal my first year or two, and I think one year I fished 81 days or something like that. Now it's way less than that, but we have a couple boats. Ginger, my wife, loves to go on the boats. And so we do a lot more kind of floating on the weekends these days. So I don't know, probably 20 or 30 times a year now, but it's bigger endeavor per day. You hook the boat up and go do a float somewhere.
I feel that you have a lot of envy from a lot of people because you work at a brewery and you love to fish, and that combination has got to be pretty epic. I bet you get that a lot.
It is, for sure. I mean, you run into an old high school buddy, and I mean, I'm envious of them as well, but they're like, I'm like, what do you do? And they're like, well, I'm a stockbroker in Chicago. And what do you do? Oh, I'm a beer rep in Montana. And they're like, that's what I should, So, yeah, there is that for sure.
Well, and Kettle House has such a huge name. I mean, everyone who comes here is like, I need to go downtown, grab a cold smoke. It's almost, Kettle House has become part of a staple of things that you need to do to be part of the culture around here.
For sure. Yeah, go to the south side, grab a cold smoke or whatever, and it's been cool to watch that business grow in my time there as well. When we first started, we were doing 700 or 800 barrels a year out of the South Side tap room only. And you'd walk into a bar or restaurant and try and talk to a guy about getting your beer put on tap, and they'd kind of, look the other way, and you could just see him be like, great, what crappy microbrew guy is trying to sell me beer now, Fast forward to today, and they're like, hey, it's the Cold Smoke guy, good to see you, so that's been pretty cool to see for sure.
Oh, yeah, and now you have the Kettle House amphitheater, too, which is huge.
Yes, it is, and boy, I hope we get to utilize that sucker soon, but the future is kind of murky there, obviously. Well, with all this COVID-19 stuff going around, it's just like, we're living in a time of a lot of uncertainty. And luckily we can our beer, and we have a lot of presence in the grocery stores, so that's been carrying our water these days. We recently had to close the North Side tap room, which is super sad.
A lot of people in Missoula sad about that.
Absolutely, and you can put me right on the top of that list, because it's just heartbreaking, some of my awesome coworkers don't work there anymore, because there's just no spot. So, yeah, super sad, but that's the times we're in right now, and I'm kind of scared to think about the next 6 months as far as all these awesome mom and pop businesses around town that are going to really be struggling.
Oh, I mean, that's what makes Missoula so special, is the mom and pop shops. And I'm nervous about it too, but sometimes I think going on the river and going fishing is kind of what can ground you and why you live here. It's
absolutely. I mean, silver lining of something like this is social distancing. You're not going to the amphitheater with 4,200 people. You're going fishing with your wife, or, in your case, your husband. And so it is a great way to ground yourself. Just when I start to get, all bunched up because I'm watching the news or reading on the internet too much, turn that sucker off, go outside, and remember why you're here.
Yeah. And I always feel that when you go fishing, it's about creating these wonderful memories. And I think with coronavirus, you can remember like, hey, I was fishing this one time during coronavirus. You always remember, kind of like September 11th, you know exactly where you were, and be like, during coronavirus, I was fishing a lot. I know you were saying that you spent like 81 days fishing during when you first moved here.
Yeah.
Do you have any pretty cool, epic stories you remember?
Oh, boy. Well, speaking of those seal dry waders and Damon Cox, I remember I didn't know what the hell a salmon fly was. And he's like, we got to go up Rock Creek for the salmon fly hatch. So, all right. So we hopped in his VW Bug and we drove up to Rock Creek. Of course, we had some beers and some fried chicken, like any 22-year-olds would back in those days. And of course, we were in his car, which was, I believe, a 68 VW Bug. And back then, I mean, right now that road is terrible, but back then it was even worse. Every year the pavement and the nice grading goes a little farther up the road. But, back then you got like a half mile past the Merc and it was just like Bill already. So we went up and we fished and we had a great day. Damon didn't have chest waders, and so I loaned him my old seal dry waders, and we separated for an hour or two, and I got back to him and he had ripped them from crotch to crotch trying to cross a log, and he's just laughing, I might have ripped your waders, and they're like, blah, 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 blah. So, we fished and had a great day and we camped out. Next day we wake up and it's like kind of pouring rain. And we're pretty far up the creek. I think we were, mile marker 28 or 30 or something up there. And so we decided to drive back towards town and just kind of wait out the rain. And we were driving along the road, and we'd probably gone 15 or 20 miles, and we were probably more like mile marker 15 or so at this point. And we're driving down the road, and there's a guy crawling across the road in his waders, and we're like, what the hell, and we're like, so we pull over, and this poor guy, this fisherman, had probably broken his ankle. We didn't want to take his waders off, but he probably broke his ankle trying to wade on some big slippery boulders. And he's like, hey, will you do me a big favor? Will you go down to the river? I left my rod by the river because I couldn't crawl up the bank with it. So we're there for a minute. We kind of, we're kind of doing like, we had some light CPR training, first aid stuff from the group home where we worked. And we had flagged down another car. This is way before everybody had cell phones, and not like it would work up there anyways. Flagged down a car. They drove down to the Merc and made a phone call, and they called the ambulance for this guy. But in the meantime, so he's kind of stable. We're just sitting with him, and he's like, go get my rod. So I walk down to the river, and there's a rod sitting there, and he's got a little mayfly tied on, and I see some fish rising, and I'm like, well, it's going to take a while. So I catch a fish, some little rainbow, and then walk back up, give him his rod. Ambulance shows up, and man, I forget, is it Granite County or Mineral County up there where the dividing line is like part of the way up the creek? And it was like the Keystone Cops, they're putting this guy in this ambulance, and it's like the volunteer ambulance fire department people, and good people, but man, back then I was like, oof. So he actually talked us into driving his car back to town. He got a ride in the ambulance. Damon drove his Bug. I drove this guy's Subaru, and he lived out in East Missoula on Easy Street. He told me his address, and I just pulled up in front of his house, took his keys, threw them in the, in between the screen door and the front door. He's like, I'm gonna buy you guys a steak dinner, or something, and drove away. Never heard from the guy again, but I always wonder what that guy's up to these days. But that was definitely a good early 90s fly fishing adventure story. So,
how old was he?
Well, he seemed
at that time.
He seemed really old, so he was probably like 35
at the time.
Yeah, right.
So true.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it'd be interesting. Do you even know if you could even drive by there and see if he's still there?
His house. I've thought of it. I've thought of that, and actually, a year or two later, Damon and his friends ended up actually renting a place on Easy Street, and we couldn't quite remember which one it was because those houses all kind of looked the exact same, but. Yeah, he used to live out there, and he used to have probably a 90 or a 91 like light blue Subaru Legacy or whatever, so not like there was 20 million of those in Missoula at the time. So.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Well, other than like just saving people from the road, I mean, you've had some pretty interesting people on your boat. You've had Les Claypool.
Yep. So, and that goes back to your time working with Ginger at Barrett Productions. Barrett Productions was looking for somebody not, ancient or whatever to have, like, maybe the kids will like this guy, So, everybody else was like Henry Winkler and Liam Neeson and like, John Denver or whoever, like people that, like our parents probably liked a little bit more than we did. So they recruited Claypool to be on one of the shows, and he loves to fish, loves to fly fish. He's, for a guy who probably doesn't get to do it very often, he's pretty good. You can just tell he's a natural fisherman and just loves the whole like mellowness of being on the water, when he's on tour. And now it's gotten to the point where, I don't know, they've probably been here like 9 out of the last 10 years or something like that with Primus or the Claypool Lennon Delirium. And we take him fishing. We've taken Sean Lennon a couple times. And that's pretty funny too. People definitely give you a weird look on the river. They're like, that looks like Sean Lennon and Les Claypool. But and Sean Lennon's a great guy. He's a trip for sure. He calls waders magic pants.
Why?
Well, because he can stand up to his waist in the water and not get wet. And he's just like, I just want to stand in the water with my magic pants, And it was like hot August or whatever, but he wanted to have his magic pants on because. So yeah, that's been a super rewarding and fun moment. I've had to pinch myself many times. So that's pretty cool.
Well, you probably get to experience them in such a different way as opposed to these celebrities or rock stars. You get to see them almost as just a buddy, being on a boat.
People are like, what's Les Claypool like? He must be so crazy. And I'm like, well, he's a super smart, funny, creative guy. But when we're hanging out, I feel like I'm with my best friend's older brother that I've only met a couple times. But we have this Venn diagram, you know, the shaded common likes. I remember, you know, to rewind back to the early 90s, I had a friend who loved to pose like ridiculous hypothetical questions. And he was like, who would you like to have a beer with? Name your top 3 people. And so I came up with this list at the time, and it was Frank Zappa, Jerry Garcia, and Les Claypool were my 3 people that I'd love to go have a beer with. And, you know, fast forward to, I guess the first time I met him was probably 2008 or 2009, somewhere in there. Fast forward to that, and I'm rowing this guy down the Blackfoot.
In and operating, working over at Kettle House, a brewery. I mean,
yeah.
The top 2 on your list.
Exactly. So crazy how life is sometimes.
Justin told me that you have this great flag, the Army Man.
The Army Man. And to be perfectly honest, it is a blatant ripoff of Faust's Freddy, which is the first foam pattern. I take that back. The second foam patterned fly that I ever laid my hands on. The first one was Paul Kohler used to own the Missoulian Angler. He was kind of a grouchy old dude. But for some reason, he was nice to me when I walked in there one day back in, you know, September of 93 or whatever. And he's sucking on a Winston, tying some flies, you know, in his little fly shop. It was right basically next door to Charlie's. And so, you know, you walk in, he kind of looks over his glasses at you, and he's, you know, got a bar hag ash on the end of this Winston tying a bug. And I said, I'm going for, what should I get? You know, what's it? And he's like, try one of these. And he had these, he called them Chernobyl ant skis, because the Chernobyl ant was the official kind of first foam bug that anybody really saw on the regular. And so I got a couple of those, and I could tie a fly back then, but barely. I could still barely tie a fly, but I saw that pattern and I saw what it did. I loved how durable it was. You could fish it all day. Big fish liked it. I don't know, it just seemed fun. Like it was like the super hopper, you know, like the old hopper, Dave's hopper, whatever, great bugs, but they'd get hammered and waterlogged after a little bit. So saw this bug, and I was like, man. So I basically, my first attempt was to try and kind of mimic Faust's Freddy. And it was a squala-ish, you know, size 8, maybe size 6, in that zone. I think it's size 8, you know, army green colored thing with rubber legs. And back then, a lot of our buddies, like the purists, would be like, no, if it doesn't have fur or feather on it, it's not a fly. Like guys were, that's not fly fishing. That's not fun. Well, I'm a utilitarian, so it's like, it's all about units of pleasure for me. So I want something that's durable and that will last, you know, that's easy. And, you know, so I started tying this bug. And, you know, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. And then you kind of take it in your own direction a little bit. So people will be like, what the hell is this? You know, but it was ugly, but it didn't matter, you know. I remember specifically fishing it with two buddies, LG and late Dave Hanna. We fished. I just was finding some old pictures, and I can remember the date because they're on the photos. So it was April 1st, 1998. We fished the Bitterroot, the famous Tucker to Bellwater, before it was just as worn out as it is now. Anyways, we were fishing down there, and we were just roping them on this foam stuff, and we just thought we were the coolest guys ever. So you have a moment like that. You have some success with a bug that you tied. It fills you up with confidence. And so I never gave up the ghost on that one, and I still have all the confidence in the world in that stupid little bug.
Oh, Justin told me, he's like, I've caught so many fish on that bug, and he's like, Al won't tie me one. anymore. So
well, I'll have to send you one. Well, maybe I shouldn't send you one because it sounds like the story is better than the reality there. But I'll send you one home. I did do a little bit of tie-in in my little February room, during the early parts of this whole Corona crap. It was a great way to escape a little bit. And
what are you tying right now?
I was tying some Army men and some like foam variations thereof. If I can tie a dozen of those suckers, it'll last me all year. So,
what's the next fishing trip?
Well, me and Ginger are gonna go camping on Friday up Rock Creek. So
nice.
I hope we don't find any dudes crawling across the roads with broken ankles. But we're gonna go drive up there and see what's going on. I don't know if it's quite salmon fly time up there yet or not, but just a good excuse to maybe camp out for the night. And
are you just going to go for just a couple of days? Or
probably just Friday night and spend Saturday up there and come home, but we'll see.
Are you going to give Ginger the seal waders?
The seal dry weight? Oh, God. Thankfully, those things are probably decomposing in the landfill above town right now. Yeah, by the time we met in 95, they were actually probably in the trash by then. So.
Ginger's like, we're not keeping these.
Yeah, she's like, oh, good Lord. So.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Al. I really appreciate it. And
it's my pleasure.
I hope that we get to go on the river. I mean, we're all here in it together, so Let's get on the river. We can do our social distancing casting and catching, and you bring those Army.
Army men, all right.
Yeah, awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Want to tie a variation of Army Man? Go to our blog at cdfishing.us. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this podcast, give us those 5 stars. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at CD Fishing USA. And remember to go fishing.